He gave a ride to an elderly woman on the side of the road, but when she said his name, the taxi driver was astonished to find out who she really was. Jake woke up to the sound of his alarm at 6 a.m., as usual. Stretching and warming up in bed, he rubbed his eyes, trying to stave off the tears. The sunlight began to stream through the window, illuminating the room and heralding a new day. Dragging himself out of bed, he walked to the bathroom and turned on the shower. As the hot water poured over him, he pondered the whirlwind of commitments he had for the day, trying to mentally prepare for another workday. After his shower, Jake put on a clean shirt and jeans, also donning a vest with the logo of the taxi company he worked for. He looked in the mirror, adjusted his hair, made a playful grimace to try and lift his spirits. "Coffee's ready," his father called from the kitchen, his tone a bit colder than usual. "Coming, Dad," he replied as he grabbed his cell phone and wallet. In the kitchen, the table was set with a simple yet tasty breakfast: fresh bread, cheese, ham, butter, and a cup of hot coffee. The atmosphere was tense since he and his father had argued the night before over a misunderstanding. He sat at the table, avoiding eye contact with the old man, and began to eat, savoring each bite in silence. Noticing his son's discomfort, his father tried to start a conversation. "How's your schedule looking today, son?" he asked, pouring more coffee into his already full cup. "Pretty packed, Dad. I've got a few passengers booked, and I'll try to pick up some extra rides through the app," explained Jake, taking a sip of his coffee, still avoiding looking at him. As soon as he finished his meal, the man stood up, still a bit awkward, but before he left the house, his father spoke to him. "Son, I'm sorry about yesterday. You know I only want what's best for you." "It's okay, Dad," he said, cutting off the old man. "We'll talk when I get back, okay? I've got to go." And with that, he walked to the taxi parked in front of his house. He unlocked the doors, got into the car, and started the engine, feeling the vehicle's vibration in his hands. With a heavy sigh, he began to drive through the city streets, the worry of the discussion with his father, who was his best friend, weighing on his mind. The sun shone on the horizon, slightly blurring his vision, and everything irritated him. However, he knew that despite the difficult moments at home, he needed to focus on work and try to resolve family issues when he returned. Jake was a 35-year-old taxi driver living with his father, Joe, who suffered from a chronic disease called multiple sclerosis. The condition affected the central nervous system, causing movement difficulties, fatigue, and pain. To help the old man, the son worked long hours and did his utmost to cover medical expenses and ensure his father received adequate treatment. However, the tremendous effort he made to support his home and care for his father was taking its toll. He neglected his own health and, as a result, suffered from constant insomnia, headaches due to stress, and his immune system was beginning to weaken. Despite the difficulties, the man was determined to keep working, believing he had no other option. The night before, the old man and his son had a heated discussion about his health. Joe was worried about his well-being and wanted him to quit his job at the taxi company as it was consuming his health, his life, and his energy. "I can't just quit my job, it's our only source of income. I need to take care of you," he argued, feeling exhausted and frustrated. "I know you're doing the best you can, but your health is also important. You won't be able to take care of me if you're sick," the old man tried to make him understand, concerned. "I'll be fine, Dad. I just need to adjust to this routine. Don't worry about me," replied Jake, even though he knew his body was crying out for rest. Joe sighed, knowing he wouldn't be able to convince his son at that moment. The discussion ended without a definitive solution, leaving a heavy atmosphere between the two. The next morning, during breakfast, the tension between them was still palpable. The taxi driver felt guilty for worrying his old man but believed he had no choice but to keep working hard. The old man, on the other hand, was distressed to see him wearing himself out day after day. While driving through the city streets, he couldn't help but think about his father's concern and wondered if he was really doing the right thing. "But I really have no way out of this job. How am I going to take care of his illness?" he reflected. "If only I had another chance in life or some miracle happened, maybe things would be different, and my father wouldn't be suffering as he is now." As the hours passed, the man picked up passengers and faced the chaotic traffic of the city. With each ride, the taxi driver felt the fatigue and stress accumulating in his body, but he tried to ignore them and move forward. After all, each passenger he took meant more money to help Joe. Then, it was already late at night, he was finishing his shift. Jake had decided to work overtime that day, taking clients up and down in the hope of earning a few extra bucks to help at home. He was exhausted, his body aching and his mind tired after the hectic day. The sky began to darken even more, covering the stars with those heavy clouds, and a light rain began to fall, turning into a persistent drizzle. The city streets were becoming increasingly empty, and the lights from the street lamps reflected on the wet asphalt, creating a melancholic atmosphere. That's when the taxi driver, already starting his way back home, spotted a little old lady on the side of the road looking for a taxi. She appeared to be about 70 years old, with grey hair pulled back into a bun, a floral dress, and a knitted cardigan. Her face expressed concern and fatigue as she held a small umbrella that barely protected her frail body from the raindrops. Despite his fatigue and desire to end his shift, he couldn't ignore the situation of the little old lady. Thus, he stopped the car next to her and lowered the window. "Good evening, ma'am. Need a ride?" he asked, trying to disguise the weariness in his voice. The little old lady looked at the man with relief and gratitude. "Oh, my son, thank you so much, young man. I didn't know if I'd be able to find someone at this hour," she said as she got into the vehicle. As soon as the old lady settled into the back seat, the taxi driver turned on the heater and asked where she would like to go. She provided the address and thanked him again with a tired smile on her face. "It's nothing, ma'am. It's late, and it's raining. I couldn't just leave you out on the street like that," he replied kindly. During the ride, the little old lady started a conversation with Jake. She commented on the weather, the city, and even the difficulty of finding a taxi at that hour. The taxi driver, despite his fatigue, listened attentively and responded whenever he could, trying to be polite and courteous. The conversation led them to more personal topics. She shared stories from her life, talking about dreams and her adventures when she was younger. She told him about the trips she had taken and how the world had changed since then. "Ah, my young man, I've lived through a lot, you know. I remember a trip I took with my husband to Europe in the 70s. We visited so many incredible places," she said, her eyes sparkling as she reminisced about the happy moments. Jake listened attentively, amazed by the woman's experiences. Then, when she asked why he was working so late, he briefly mentioned his father and his concern for his illness. "You know, ma'am, I work hard to take care of him. He has multiple sclerosis and needs professional help, and that's why I have a lot of medical expenses. Sometimes I do a lot of extra work, like today," he shared with a tired sigh. The old lady listened to his story and responded with understanding and affection. "You are a dedicated son. I'm sure your father knows that. It's important to take care of those we love, but don't forget to take care of yourself too," she advised with a concerned look. Jake thanked the lady for her words and promised to try to find a balance in his life. The empathy between the two grew with each word exchanged, and the taxi driver was surprised by the energy that the lady emanated, even in such a draining situation. As the taxi driver continued through the dark and humid streets, the two continued to talk. Then, at one moment, they passed in front of a park, and the little old lady mentioned that she used to take her grandchildren there to play. Coincidentally, that park was the same one the man frequented as a child, which aroused a sense of familiarity with her. "I've been to that park before, ma'am. I used to play there when I was a child," he commented, trying to understand the origin of that unexpected connection. The little old lady smiled and continued. "It's a wonderful place, full of good memories. I used to go there with my grandchildren whenever I could." As the conversation progressed, Jake began to feel a strange sense of déjà vu. He looked at her in the rearview mirror and couldn't shake the feeling that she was not a stranger to him. The old lady talked about things and places that seemed vaguely familiar to him, as if he had crossed paths with her at some point in his life. "Have I ever taken her on a ride during these 10 years as a taxi driver?" he thought silently. The mystery grew in the man's mind, leaving him restless and curious. He couldn't help but feel that there was something more to that situation. Everything she talked about, her life, things she liked to do, places she liked to visit, things she believed in, caused in him a strange feeling of having seen or heard it before. Moreover, it was as if she knew about his personality and desires. He was starting to get suspicious. Then, noticing the discomfort of the taxi driver, the old lady looked at him with an enigmatic gaze and said, "Jake, I need to tell you something." Hearing her pronounce his name made him even more startled. The man had not mentioned his name at any point during the entire conversation. He absolutely had not said his name. "How do you know my name?" he asked with a lump in his throat. The old lady sighed and replied, I know this may seem strange, but there is a connection between us that goes beyond what you can imagine, Jake." The taxi driver looked at the lady, confused and anxious, trying to remember her in every possible way or anything that could help him understand where he had seen her or she had seen the woman. The little old lady continued with a soft and careful voice, "I want you to remember, Jake. Think about your childhood, the people who were around you. I was there, but you were so small that you might not remember." He tried to concentrate for a moment, reliving his childhood memories. Blurred images passed through his mind, but nothing seemed to fit. I can't remember, ma'am. Please tell me, who are you?" he implored, increasingly intrigued. She hesitated for a moment before responding. She knew that the revelation would be a shock to him and did not want to cause more confusion. However, it was time to tell the truth. "My dear, I am your grandmother, Grace," she said with tear-filled eyes. The man was stunned, not knowing how to react. The grandmother Grace he knew had died when he was still small, and he only knew of her through the memories shared by his father. It was impossible that this woman was telling the truth. This can't be, this can't be. My grandmother died when I was a child. What are you trying to do? Questioned Jake, incredulous and suspicious. The little old lady looked at him with a mix of sadness and understanding, knowing that it would be difficult for the man to accept the reality. However, she was determined to make him understand. I know it's hard to believe, but I am your grandma. I can prove it, she said as she searched for something in her purse. The taxi driver watched, still skeptical, as the old lady took out a small metal box. She opened it carefully and showed him a faded photograph where a woman very similar to her appeared next to a smiling child. The child was him. I took this photo when you were just 4 years old, my dear, explained the grandmother with a nostalgic look. I never wanted to be away from you, but circumstances beyond my control took me away from you. The man, still driving, looked at the photograph, feeling a lump in his throat. If that woman really was his grandmother, how could she be there, apparently alive and healthy, when everyone believed she had died? I was at your funeral, this can't be real. I must be hallucinating. He was stunned. The old lady looked into his eyes with a serious expression and explained the truth. My grandson, I can't stay very long in this plane. I came here to deliver an important message to you. Still trying to absorb everything that was happening, he listened attentively. She continued, you need to take better care of your health and the life you lead, not just for yourself but also for your father. The effort you're making is commendable, but this can't go on. Your father needs you to be well, by his side. He can't be left alone all day while you completely give up on yourself. Moved, he responded, but I can't just quit my job, Grandma. I'm a taxi driver, and that's how I support our family. My father, I don't know how I can help with the illness he has. I don't have much compared to the treatment, and that's why I can't just stop. My health can wait, but his can't. The old lady placed her hand on his shoulder and said, I understand, my son. But trust me when I say that there are other ways to take care of both of you. You need to find a balance in your life and learn to take care of yourself too. Before Jake could respond, they arrived at the address the old lady had requested. He looked at the house and suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. It was the house where he had lived as a child, his grandmother's house, abandoned for years. Why did you bring me here? He asked, incredulous and very frightened. The old lady smiled gently and said, Here, I keep many memories of my grandson. I wanted to remind you of where you came from and the people who love you. Remember that your father needs you more than ever. And above all, never lose hope. With those words, the lady opened the taxi door and walked into the abandoned house, leaving him alone inside the car. He didn't know how to process everything that was happening. He was feeling a mix of emotions, confusion, longing, sadness. Deciding to face his fears, Jake resolved to follow her. I must be hallucinating, he muttered to himself as he got out of the vehicle and ran to the front door with his heart racing. Inside, everything was abandoned and overtaken by time. The peeling walls and the floor covered in dust showed how much the house had been forgotten. Despite the deplorable state of the place, he noticed that there were still traces of his past scattered around. Photos of his grandmother and his father as a child were hanging on the faded, moth-eaten walls. But this brought forth a flood of emotions and long-lost memories. The taxi driver began to explore the house cautiously, feeling a strange sense of welcome and fear at the same time. He remembered playing there as a child, running through the hallways and hiding in the closets. With each step he took, memories surfaced in his mind, making him emotional and filled with sadness and nostalgia. Passing by one of the rooms, Jake found an old photo album. I was all wet in this photo, he thought, chuckling to himself as he saw himself in just his underwear, jumping in the puddles formed by the rain. Other photos showed the happy life his family had led before his grandmother's death. At that moment, the longing and loss of her hit him hard, and the man couldn't help but let the tears run down his face. That was the limit for him, and then he decided to leave. His heart ached because he didn't want to lose his father too. He was his only remaining family. But then, as he walked back slowly, trying to assimilate all the emotions that were afflicting him, Jake ended up tripping over a loose floorboard. Curious, he decided to investigate and, to his surprise, discovered a box hidden under the floorboards. What is this? Trembling, the taxi driver opened the box, and his eyes widened. No, this can't be real, he said, completely perplexed by what he was seeing. Inside the box were a gold bar and a significant amount of money. This is unbelievable, muttered Jake, still trying to understand the magnitude of that discovery. With his heart overflowing with gratitude and realizing that the appearance of his grandmother was really a miracle, the miracle he had so longed for, he looked up and said, Thank you, Grandma. I don't even know how to thank you for this. That hidden treasure, apparently left by the old lady, had the potential to change his life and that of his father, providing them with the financial stability they so needed. With that money, Jake could take better care of both of them, even without sacrificing his health at work. That day, the taxi driver returned home, still unable to believe what had happened. When he got home, he found Joe. "Do you believe in miracles, Dad?" he asked the old man, his eyes filled with tears. Jake then recounted the experience he had that day, showing the box full of gold and money. The old man, crying, hugged him. "This is a miracle, a miracle. Your grandmother has always taken care of us, and now she's taking care of us even after she's gone." And so, from that day on, the taxi driver and his father decided to use the inheritance wisely. The man managed to find a balance in his life, taking better care of himself and his father without the financial pressure that had previously suffocated them. The money allowed them to pay for better medical treatments and therapies, which helped in the recovery of Joe's health. Additionally, Jake invested in his own education and fulfilled his dream of opening a taxi cooperative, where he and other drivers could work together, sharing resources and obtaining better working conditions. Their lives changed completely, and the former taxi driver, now a businessman, could finally enjoy a more peaceful and happy life. Then, father and son celebrated that achievement together and never forgot the mysterious night that transformed their lives and led them to a prosperous and hopeful future. What do you think of this story? Do you think they acted right? Leave your comment below to know your opinion. It is very important to us. If you liked this exciting story, help us by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Thank you very much for watching us and see you in the next story.